Have you ever noticed how your thoughts can turn against you when they start to multiply? One thought leads to another, and before you know it, you are trapped inside your own head, spinning, analyzing, imagining, worrying. It is as if the mind forgets it is just a tool and begins to believe it is the master. Thich Nhat Hanh once said that thinking is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. He taught that peace is not found by controlling thoughts, but by understanding them, smiling at them, and returning home to the present moment. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe and leave a like, so this message can reach someone who might need a little peace today. Overthinking is like standing in a storm of your own making. Every gust of wind is a new idea, a new fear, a new scenario that never actually happened. And yet it feels real. Your heartbeat rises, your breath tightens, your body tenses, and your mind runs faster, trying to outrun its own shadow. Thich Nhat Hanh would describe this as the habit energy of the mind. It is that invisible force that pulls you toward repetition, the same worries, the same internal dialogues, the same restless seeking. You wake up and the first thing you do is think. Not feel, not breathe, not notice the morning light, but think. And when you are alone, the mind fills the silence with endless noise because silence can be uncomfortable. But why does overthinking destroy the mind? Because the mind was never designed to carry everything at once. It is like a glass, meant to hold water, useful when filled, dangerous when overflowing, is less than #0. 5# is greater than. When you fill it with thoughts of the past and future, it can no longer hold the present. And the present is where life actually happens. Thich Nhat Hanh taught a simple but radical truth, that most of our suffering comes not from what happens, but from what we think about what happens. He said, when you wash the dishes, not with the mind already planning tomorrow or replaying today's mistakes. Because when you are truly there, fully aware, the simplest act becomes sacred. The moment becomes complete. You might wonder how something so ordinary can be the answer to something as heavy as overthinking. But that is exactly the secret. Zen is not about escaping thought, it is about seeing it clearly. When you observe your thinking without judgment, you begin to see that thoughts are like clouds. They drift in, they drift out. You do not chase the clouds, you simply watch the sky. Overthinking makes you forget the sky. It makes you believe you are the cloud. It convinces you that every passing idea is your identity, that every anxious thought is truth. But the mind is a storyteller, and sometimes it tells stories that were never meant to be believed. Have you ever replayed a conversation over and over, analyzing what you said, what they meant, how you could have done better? That is the mind clinging to unfinished business. Zen would say, it is already gone. The sound of that moment has faded, just like the echo of a bell. What remains is only your attachment to it is less than #0. 5# is greater than, and when you let go, peace quietly returns. Thich Nhat Hanh often invited his students to pause between breaths, to breathe in and know they are breathing in, to breathe out and know they are breathing out. Simple, yes. But within that simplicity is the most profound kind of freedom. Because for one moment the storm stops, the waves settle, and you remember that you are not your thoughts. Overthinking destroys your mind, not because it is evil, but because it disconnects you from what is real. It turns the mind into a maze with no exit. Every corridor looks the same, every door leads to more analysis. You start searching for meaning in things that simply are. You try to fix what was never broken. You demand certainty in a world that only ever promised change. Zen stops this, not by force, but by awareness. When you bring awareness to a thought, it loses its grip. Awareness is like sunlight. It does not argue with darkness. It just makes it disappear. And slowly the mind begins to trust the stillness again. Imagine sitting by a pond on a quiet morning. The water is clear, the surface calm. You can see the reflection of trees, the sky, maybe even your own face. Now, imagine throwing pebble after pebble into the pond. Every pebble creates ripples that distort the reflection. That is what overthinking does. It throws endless pebbles into the pond of your awareness. And then it wonders why you can no longer see clearly. Zen invites you to stop throwing pebbles is less than #0. 5# is greater than to let the surface settle until the reflection returns. Thich Nhat Hanh once told a story about a young monk who could not stop worrying. He was anxious about his future, his practice, and whether he would ever find peace. Thich Nhat Hanh asked him to go for a walk, slowly, silently, feeling every step touch the earth. At first, the young monk tried to think his way into peace. He tried to breathe correctly, to walk perfectly. But as the minutes passed, something softened. He noticed the sound of birds, the scent of the earth after rain. He began to feel alive again. That is when Thich Nhat Hanh smiled and said, "You see, peace is already here. You only need to stop running." That is the essence of Zen. Peace is not something to achieve, it is something to remember. Overthinking is simply the forgetting. And mindfulness, the gentle art of remembering. You might think, but I cannot stop thinking. That is true. The goal is not to stop thought, but to stop believing every thought as truth. To smile at your thoughts as you would at a child playing. You do not scold them, you simply watch, knowing they will tire themselves out. Thich Nhat Hanh called this the practice of non-judgmental awareness. When you see your thoughts with kindness, their sharp edges begin to dissolve. Zen stops overthinking, not with effort, but with softness. When you relax into the moment, the need to control disappears. And when control disappears, peace enters like air through an open window is less than #0. 5# is greater than. Sometimes the most radical act is to do nothing. To sit in stillness and feel your own presence. The mind will resist. It will say, "This is boring, this is useless, this is not helping." But beneath that noise is something unshaken awareness itself. It is always there, waiting for you to notice. In Zen, the mind is compared to a monkey jumping from branch to branch. It never stays still. It seeks, it fears, it grasps. But Thich Nhat Hanh said you can invite the monkey to sit beside you. You do not have to chase it away. You just offer it your calm presence. Eventually, the monkey rests too. Overthinking often feels like safety. We believe that if we analyze enough, we will prevent mistakes, avoid pain, or control the outcome. But thinking cannot protect you from life. It can only separate you from it. Zen teaches that safety is not the absence of uncertainty, but the acceptance of it. When you stop trying to predict, you start to truly experience. Thich Nhat Hanh's life itself was a lesson in this. He lived through war, exile, and loss. Yet when you hear his voice, it carries no bitterness. Only peace. He once said, "When you learn to suffer well, you suffer much less." That is the paradox of Zen. The more you accept your pain, the less power it has over you. Overthinking magnifies pain. It takes a single wound and reopens it with every memory, every hypothetical scenario, every what if. Zen heals by returning you to what is. The warmth of the air, the rise of your breath, the sound of a bird calling in the distance is less than #0. 5# is greater than. Reality becomes medicine when you allow it to be enough. You might notice that moments of true peace never involve thought. They come when you are watching the sunset, listening to rain, or holding someone's hand. You are not analyzing those moments, you are living them. That is what Zen brings back into your life. Presence that feels whole, simple, complete. So the next time you catch yourself spiraling in thought, pause. Do not fight the thought. Just notice it. Feel your feet on the ground. Take one slow breath and say quietly to yourself, I am here. That small moment of awareness is the beginning of freedom. Overthinking destroys your mind when it becomes your only way of living. Zen restores your mind by reminding you that life is not something to solve, but something to touch, to feel, to experience. You do not need to silence your thoughts to find peace. You only need to remember the space in which those thoughts appear. That space, that awareness, is who you really are. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it." Overthinking blinds you to that joy because it keeps you searching for something that is already here. When you slow down, when you breathe deeply and smile softly, the world opens again. You realize that the mind is not the enemy. It is simply a wave within the ocean of awareness. And when you stop identifying with the wave, you return to the sea. So if this reflection resonates with you, stay close to the stillness within you is less than #0. 5 is greater than. Practice returning to the breath. Notice the small, quiet miracles that exist between thoughts. Because in the end, peace is not found by thinking harder. It is found by thinking less and being more. Sometimes the mind becomes so busy trying to understand life that it forgets to live it. You think about happiness more than you feel it. You think about peace more than you touch it. It is like standing at the edge of a river, describing the water, studying its movement but never stepping in. Overthinking builds that distance. It turns living into observation. Thich Nhat Hanh reminded his students that mindfulness is not about thinking less, but about thinking in the right way. Right thinking is born from right view. When you see clearly, your thoughts naturally become gentle and calm. When your view is clouded, your thoughts become restless. It is not the number of thoughts that hurts you, it is the confusion behind them. Zen invites you to slow down enough to see where your thoughts come from. To ask quietly, what am I really trying to find with all this thinking? Am I looking for certainty, for control, for safety? Often the mind is not thinking because it needs to, it is thinking because it is afraid to stop. Stopping feels like falling, but when you stop, you realize you are resting. Imagine sitting in a quiet room, late at night. You notice how your thoughts echo louder in the stillness. At first it feels uncomfortable, but if you just sit and breathe, you begin to see patterns. How thoughts repeat themselves, how nothing stays for long, is less than #0. 5 is greater than. That is awareness waking up. When you become aware, overthinking loses its authority. You start to sense that your thoughts are not commands, they are clouds drifting through the open sky of consciousness. You do not need to stop the clouds, you just need to remember the sky. There is a story about a woman who told Thich Nhat Hanh she could not meditate because her mind ran everywhere. He smiled and said, then follow it, but follow it with mindfulness. If your mind runs away 100 times, bring it back 100 times. That is not failure, that is practice. Peace is not the absence of movement, it is the gentle, returning again and again. Overthinking can feel like a trap, but it is also a doorway. Every anxious thought is an invitation to wake up, to ask, where am I right now? What happens if I let this thought go for a breath? That breath is the beginning of Zen. Mindfulness is like sunlight touching a flower. When sunlight touches the flower, it opens. When mindfulness touches a thought, that thought transforms. It becomes soft and then it passes. Overthinking thrives in darkness, in unconscious habit, in resistance. The more you fight your thoughts, the stronger they become. But when you observe them, they dissolve by themselves. Thich Nhat Hanh taught smiling meditation. To be aware and to smile with understanding. A small smile tells your mind that it does not have to run anymore. And in that act, you reclaim your power. Overthinking destroys clarity because it separates you from direct experience is less than hash zero. 5 hash is greater than when you eat, you think about work. When you work, you think about rest. When you rest, you think about tomorrow. Zen brings you home to the only place where peace is possible. In Plum Village, monks chew slowly, silently, tasting each bite as if for the first time. It is not about food, it is about the act of living. When you live mindfully, overthinking becomes unnecessary. You begin to see how thought and reality differ. Thought says, I am not enough. Reality says you are breathing. Thought says something is missing. Reality says, look, nothing is missing. To stop overthinking is to return to your senses. To feel the breath, to hear the sounds, to see the colors as they are. Each time you do, thoughts quiet on their own. Thich Nhat Hanh spoke of interbeing. Nothing exists by itself. Everything is connected. The cloud becomes rain, the rain becomes the river becomes your tea. When you drink tea mindfully, you drink the entire cosmos. When you see connection everywhere, you no longer feel the need to control everything. The habit of overthinking often comes from a lack of trust, a fear that if you stop managing, everything will fall apart.